Who disrupts my coronation?
Everyone has been destroyed because of this freak. I won't allow it! These babies just saved this lame fest party!
Hello, everybody. It is I, Alex, the producer, running solo this week as Birdman wanted the week off for a couple reasons. One, it was his birthday week, and he had a bunch of visitors coming by since last year for COVID and everything. He wasn't really able to do that, so he's had some family come by one day. He had me and a couple of people over another day on his actual birthday, as well as with his activist involvement with local and provincial and federal politics. He's had, I think he told me it was like 3 different days of 5-hour meetings each day, listening into things and plans and all this. And it was too much for him to take in. Plus, he's got schoolwork and a bunch of other stuff. So he was catching up on reviews and all this, but he's like, I just don't have time to do the show. And I said, yeah, buddy, don't worry about it. I'm going to run the show then this week. He should be back for Halloween. We won't be recording on Halloween Day. Not very likely, but it would probably be the Monday after, and we'll have the show up maybe a little bit later than normal simply because of that. As far as other stuff coming up this week, I'll talk at the end of the show. We've got pretty much at least one show every day. It's pretty packed, honestly. But in this particular show, we'll have sort of a shortened news and a shortened weird news because 2 to 3 stories each, and it won't be quite as long simply because we won't be bouncing anything back and forth. But we found a few things that we'll talk about on here. As far as reviews go, Birdman has instructed me that he has 2 that he would like to include. He has a review of NHL, the new NHL game, as well as Suicide Squad, the Bluray, I believe. And I have a Bluray from Paramount from the 1920s to talk about. So that's going to be in the show this week. Without further ado, let's go with Birdman's Suicide Squad review.
This is a fair request, and I promise I will not judge any person only as a teenager, and that this is no more right than saying all teenagers are drunken dope addicts or glue sniffers.
You know the deal. Successfully complete the mission, you get 10 years off your sentence. You fail to follow my orders in any way, and I detonate the explosive device in the base of your skull.
Can do the job for free. So this is the famous Suicide Squad.
Hey guys, this is Mike the Birdman here, and I'm here to tell you about one of the latest releases from Warner Brothers Home Entertainment. A review copy was provided to us. I'm talking about the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray and digital code version of The Suicide Squad. What can I say about the James Gunn movie that came out this past summer that hasn't already been said? Well, frankly, if you want my honest opinion, I can tell you that in a very few words, it's fucking awesome. That's all I really need to say. This is kind of a semi-sequel slash reboot to Suicide Squad that came out back in 2016, I want to say, with Will Smith, Margot Robbie, Joel Kinnaman. In this one, you get other people like Nathan Fillion and Michael Rooker, the kid from Saturday Night Live, and a bunch of other people. And, you know, you obviously get the returning Joel Kinnaman, Margot Robbie, and, you know, people like Jai Courtney. And even Sylvester Stallone's in this as the voice of King Shark, which is kind of awesome. So, yeah, basically the Suicide Squad gets tasked by going to this small South American country, and they are basically looking for what's known as Project Starfish. If you've seen the trailers, you can probably take a guess on what that is. The DC Universe's version of Starro the Conqueror, who did appear in, I want to say, Superman, the animated series, but this version's a lot more cool and a lot more brutal. The movie itself is signature gun. It's over the top, it's wacky, it's vulgar, it's violent, but it's awesome. I would say this is probably in the top 3 of the DC movies currently out right now, if not maybe even the top 2. And that's really saying something, because the Suicide Squad IP has had its ups and downs. Even the animated stuff, the sequels were better than the original. I think it was called Assault on Arkham, but Hell to Pay was a lot better. So the movie looks awesome. It is awesome. I watched a good chunk of it in 4K. I watched the rest on Blu-ray so I could go through the special features. It sounds loud and bombastic. I'm watching it in the 5.1 surround sound setup. I'm watching it on a 60-inch 4K Roku TV with HDR. The blacks are nice and rich. The colors really pop, especially with like Starro. And when you see some of the creatures up close, you can feel the texture on their skin. You can see texture on the kind of uniforms as well. It's really something to behold. To talk about special features, there's a couple here. There's about 17 minutes-ish of deleted scenes. I can see why most of them were cut. There's only 1 or 2 maybe I might have put back into the movie. The gag reel, and normally these are pretty stupid. This was actually kind of funny. They actually whacked a camera guy as they were getting out of the truck when they were just escaping the club with the Thinker, and safety on set, very important. There's also a feature where they talk about how they brought King Shark to life. They interview Sylvester Stallone for a few minutes, and then the guy who was the motion capture dude on set, who is also one of the Suicide Squad techs. He's going to be in the Peacemaker TV series as well. They also showed off some additional material. There's like a featurette called Way of the Gun, where it kind of talks about James Gunn's way of making films. Also talks about how people have worked with him before, why he's the perfect guy for this, and I can't disagree. There's a featurette on the characters, though not as long as I would have liked, but they did bring in the original creator of the Suicide Squad comics to talk for just a couple minutes. I really wish we could have got like bios for each character, like, hey, here's 5 minutes on Savant, here's 5 minutes on Blackguard, here's Mongal, or maybe here's clips from the various media, because it's not like Warner Brothers doesn't own this. We also get a scene breakdown. They talk about Starro. There's like a kind of featurette on that. And then there's a couple of retro style trailers. One that's done up like a war movie, one that's done like a horror movie. And then finally there's the James Gunn commentary, always worth listening to. Am I gonna recommend Suicide Squad? Oh gee, I wonder what I think. If you've been collecting the DC anime or the DC movies so far, this is a no-brainer. Even if you're not a big comic book fan, I think this is worth watching because it's a fun popcorn movie. You don't need to know a crap ton about comic books to really appreciate it. All you really need to know is that these are bad guys that suck. The government has said either do what we say or we'll kill you. I mean, they only mention like Superman once, because that's like Bloodsport's storyline where he put Superman in the hospital with a kryptonite bullet. This is the prequel to the Peacemaker TV show, which comes out on HBO Max in January. And it's going to be pretty awesome, considering the trailer just came out at DC Fandom a couple of days ago as of this recording. It's pretty neat. So, The Suicide Squad on 4K Ultra HD, Blu-ray, and digital from Warner Bros. Home Entertainment gets a buy it now from us here at This Week in Geek.
Any questions?
Hand?
Yes, that is your hand. Very good.
We're all gonna die.
I hope so.
The Prime Minister of Sweden visited Washington today, and my tiny little nipples went to France.
Gossip, rumors, panic in the streets. We're lucky.
This Week in Geek
News.
Okay, so it is news time. What do we have this week? I'm going to start right off the bat and say that partially because Birdman's not here, and partially because it's still sort of an ongoing story, we're not going to discuss too much of what's happening on the set of Rust that's been sort of all-encompassing the news the past several days. That's the story revolving around a prop gun mishandling or whatever that resulted in deaths on the set of the Alec Baldwin film. Obviously, we can speculate about it all we want, but there's too much unknown that we're probably going to find out in the next week or two. So that may be something that we discuss once, we have concrete, timeline of exactly what's going on. So you've probably heard it talked about to death everywhere else. So we're just not going to do that because, again, it's just pure speculation at this point. As far as anything else goes, news-wise, we do have a few things here. The first story here is that Advance Wars, the remake, they included Advance Wars 1 and 2 from way back, Way Forward, is been pushed back to spring 2022. That was sort of the last game I was looking forward to at the end of the year. And I've been in talks with Nintendo about securing a review copy of it because, you have to talk about these things sometimes ahead of time because come beginning or middle of December, a lot of companies, the PR divisions of different companies will actually be taking their Christmas breaks. And sometimes that means they take it right at Christmas for 2 weeks. And sometimes it means that the week or two before Christmas, they take it. So I wanted to be sure that we were on board. And they had said up until a few weeks ago, oh yeah, sure. Don't worry. We'll make sure that you get a copy. But I'm just assuming now that that's being pushed. Here is the article. This is brought to us from gamesindustry.biz. Nintendo has announced that the upcoming Advance Wars 1 and 2 reboot camp has been delayed into next year. The title, a Switch remaster of the original 2 games, was slated for launch on December 3rd. So I guess that would have technically missed American Thanksgiving, but still would have been there in time for the Christmas rush. It is getting a physical release, so this might actually help it moving to the spring. The game will now come out in spring 2022 as per Nintendo, but a specific release date has not been given. I guess, wasn't it around the same week as the Brain Age release that was coming out? So maybe this is smart, spread it out a little bit. The game just needs a little more time for fine-tuning, Nintendo said via Twitter. You'll be battling with Andy and friends soon. Thanks for your patience. Nintendo currently unveiled this new Switch Online, yada, yada, yada. Expansion Pass, we've talked about that. Sure. I mean, my guess, spring. I think they'd probably want it out in March, but it might be an April release. Because if that, December, January, February to March to April, 4 months. 4 months is probably plenty for this kind of game. It looked like it was pretty much ready, but they might have found a few bugs, or maybe they wanted to add a couple things to it. Plus the crowding around Christmas is one thing. Or this means that they had a game that was ready to go in April or May that has been pushed back. So it's very possible that a larger game that they thought was going to be launching Q1 or at the very beginning of Q2 was not ready to go. So that might have been pushed to the summer or fall. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to fill the gap with the game here. And instead of moving like Brain Age or something, they move this. So it's very possible this game was 99% done and ready and would be ready to go for, let's say it had to go gold next week to get ready, let's say, or had to go gold a month ahead of time so they could have carts pressed. It's actually probably a little more than that, actually, the way the logistics go now. But let's say that they needed 5 weeks to know for sure. They probably went, okay, we'll probably be done, but just to be safe, let's move it, and we can move it to a time slot where maybe we're not going to have a whole lot of other stuff come out, and we can maybe do a little more to promote it. So, because so far what we've got coming still is what Mario Party from them, Pokemon, and Brain Age. Is that the 3 before Christmas? Those are you got one huge title, and Mario Party is big enough, and then you've got the one Brain Age. I think that's probably. Is that it? Let me just double check right now because I kind of have a feeling. I think there's something else in there because I thought it was 4 or 5 games which was kind of surprising. That's what they still had left. because Nintendo doesn't tend to crowd too many. They usually do one a month. It seems as they're, regardless of size, it doesn't seem to be that they ever go far beyond that. Even though they probably could, they just don't want to crowd things, especially when there's a Pokemon game coming. So let me see here. We are into. Okay, so for the end of October, looks like Mario Party Superstars is coming this week, which I haven't heard back from. I should probably check on, see if we're getting a review copy or not. Might be a release day review. Then November 19th is Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And it's Big Brain Academy, Brain versus Brain on December 3rd. So that was going to be the exact same day. So 2 games on the same day. I think they're both getting physical releases. So that would have been maybe too much for them, even though they're smaller titles, for them to put that out plus Advance Wars. And yeah, that's it for the end of the year. So yeah, that was what it was. It was weird that there were 2 games coming out the exact same day. So, I mean, sure, I'm happy for it. I'll probably still want to check it out come springtime. I don't think it'll be pushed beyond spring. This is not going to be a game that gets pushed back twice. The developers are really good about getting things out on time. At the same time, I'm still getting the inkling that it's not that development wasn't done. I think they just moved it to make it make more sense financially. And for our next story here, it's sort of, we'll talk about 2 stories, I guess. A couple acquisitions that were happening here. So Focus Home Interactive acquired partner studio Dixiems. I can't pronounce that, unfortunately. So French developer and publisher Focus Home Interactive has acquired that studio I just mentioned, one of its partner studios, for an undisclosed sum. The studio, also based in France, teamed up with Focus last year to release 3D puzzle platformer Shady Part of Me. They talk about it's a real pleasure to grab them, and that they're going to be supporting them back and forth with different projects. It should note that back in August, Focus also acquired Streets of Rage for publisher Dotemu for a total of $45 million. They also snapped up Stream On Studio, developer of several Warhammer branded shooters, in April of last year. So Focus is really coming up from behind, just slowly acquiring other studios, and Dotemu is one of the bigger indie publishers out there putting out good stuff. So acquiring them, it sounds like they're still going to be using that branding, and I'm assuming a lot of this is purchasing these companies. If I had to guess, it's honestly out of fear of somebody else, like the Embracer Group for THQ or somebody snatching them up too. Like, there's a few companies out there that are grabbing all these indie studios, and I think some of this is like fear purchases, if anything. And the other one we have to say here is that NetEase acquires Grasshopper Manufacture. That is the company owned by Suda. So we'll say here, developer Grasshopper Manufacture. This is also from gamesindustry.biz, I should mention. Grasshopper Manufacture has been acquired by NetEase. The agreement was signed on May 31st, 2021. NetEase announced today in a press release, but the Chinese firm didn't disclose the terms of the agreement. I guess they waited till enough time had passed on the contract, yada yada. Japanese studio Grasshopper Manufacture has been in operation for 23 years under the leadership of Goichi Suda51 Suda, and is behind the No More Heroes franchise and titles such as Killer 7 and Lollipop Chainsaw. The company was previously part of the Gung Ho group. Gung Ho, probably known most for, I think it's Puzzles and Dragons they publish, the sort of gotcha puzzle-y type game on mobile platforms. And we reviewed the sort of weird, like they have a bunch of other little games, but it's all sort of the same style. And then they have like a few published games that are out of left field. Like they did the Grandia HD remaster, where it's Grandia 1 and 2 on the Switch. And we reviewed a copy of that for them. I think it was last year. And I was pleasantly surprised at how high quality that release was. And I was like, maybe they should do more RPGs. But that was like sort of one of the last things they published in the last year. I didn't even honestly know that they had owned Grasshopper Manufacturer. I just assumed that it was like a separate entity and that Nintendo was publishing their games. But it says here, as we all know, NetEase Games has developed many excellent games in the past, and I have been long aware of NetEase's creative capabilities. Suda commented, when talking with NetEase about developing more unique console games together, we resonated. After a lot of thoughts, we've unanimously decided to get together in long term through deeper cooperation to create more good content for gamers. That sounds nice, nice and everything, but Suda didn't own his company. From the sounds of things, he had really nothing to do. Like he can put on a big marketing face all he wants, but the reality is, it sounds like Gung Ho owned them. Gung Ho decided to sell them, not him. He has no control of that company, so that's bullshit. NetEase Games understands the strengths of Grasshopper Manufacturer and is willing to support us, and is an extremely reliable partner. Yada yada yada. Except for the volatility surrounding the entire gaming industry in China, which we don't have time to get into here, but this could be good or could be bad. This could mean that he does get his creative freedom because the company wants to see creative stuff. The only problem is censorship's a big thing in China, and I don't know how this is going to go. We'll have to see in the future. Moving on from here, I would say the last story we're going to talk about for the regular news is brought to us from Kotaku. This is a new, larger Xbox storage expansion costs more than an Xbox Series S. And I knew this was coming. So it says here that Xbox just announced 2 new SSD storage expansion cards made by the official storage partner Seagate to boost space on your Xbox Series S or X. Joining the already released 1 terabyte card will be a 512 gig card, which they're pricing at $140 American. So that's going to be $179 Canadian, I'm guessing. And a hefty 2 terabyte for $400 US. That makes it about 500 Canadian. Now, that's a 2 ter. That's no. To give you an idea, I bought a 200. Okay, there's more information here about what it is. Yada yada yada. The big point here is, I know in Canada it's $379 plus taxes for an Xbox Series S because I bought one for $379. Retail, no scalping, nothing. And that's Canadian. It's $399 for a 2 terabyte American. So it is more, significantly more, to get the 2 terabyte. Now, again, it brings up the question as to why would you want a 2 terabyte drive for the Series S? Like, sure, it gives you basically 6 times the storage you currently have. But at that price, you would have been better off going with a Series X and then paying for a 512 or 1 terabyte expansion. And it works out to be roughly the same price, but double the performance. So what they really need to do is make a 256 gig card for 100. They got to make it less than $100, 79 American maybe or something. Make it 79 American, 99 Canadian, and that would give you almost double the storage in your. But even then, it's actually wait. If you can keep it under $100, that makes it maybe worthwhile to people where they can justify not getting a Series X. And I know there's shortages of stock of things, and if that's the case, then you know what? Don't buy it at all, because I bought a 250 gig Samsung SSD for the PS5 that is twice the speed of these cards. Twice the speed, quite literally. These guys read, I think, at 3 gigabytes per second is what the specs were for these, and the one I have is like 6.8 or something. So it's literally twice the read speed, and I paid $79.99 on when it was on sale, and then I had to pay $10 for a heatsink. So $89, and that's because I just needed something simple at first to try it out. If I had wanted a 500 gig version, so this is $139, a 500 gig version would have been about $129.99 on sale. So Canadian. So it's to get one for the PlayStation, you're looking at maybe 30% cheaper than what, and even actually wait, the 1 terabyte, which the 1 terabyte is $300 Canadian. A 1 terabyte is $200 Canadian for the PlayStation 5. So it is quite literally 33% cheaper for double the speed. And it's kind of ridiculous what they're trying to get here. I don't care. They say about how easy it is, plug and playing it. You're not taking them out. Like, you're not going to hot swap this thing and plug it into a second console. You know how few people have second consoles? Like I am a rarity in that I have an X and then I have an S. And I'm not going to be unplugging the drive from one and plugging into the other. You're just never going to do that, ever. Once it's plugged into the back of your system, it's plugged forever. And anybody that says otherwise is foolish. The only reason you're going to take it out is if you're transporting the system somewhere and you don't want it to break off in the back of your system. It doesn't make any sense to me why you would ever plug it in and plug it into something else, because when you do that, it's going to have to do a bunch of security checks to make sure the game is playable with that profile and yada, yada, yada. It's a pain in the ass. Like, you're not going to do that. It's not like an SD card. Like, if you have 2 Nintendo Switches, how often are you taking the SD card out of one and plugging the other? You're not, ever, because it's locked to that system. So it's stupid. So the argument of it being plug and play, yeah, but that's only if you're only using it one time. What does it matter that it takes you 30 seconds to take the side off of a case? You've got to unscrew a screw for 5 seconds. You place it in place. You put the screw in for 5 seconds. Within 3 minutes, you've got your upgrade done to your PlayStation 5, and it never has to move again. And I honestly think, this is my own personal thing, if you're reading a lot of games and writing a lot of games back and forth to the series expansion cards, those things get really warm. I feel like they're going to wear out faster than a good Samsung drive inside of a good heatsink in your PlayStation 5 will. Just because it's a smaller space, they do, like, the smaller those drives are, the more heat they have concentrated on them. So we'll see how it goes, but it's exactly what I figured. It's still too pricey. Far, far, far too pricey. They need a second brand to come out that offers something cheaper, because as we all know, proprietary stuff, especially from Seagate, is kind of ridiculous. And that's kind of going to do it for the news this week. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to come in with my review of Paramount Pictures' 100th anniversary of The Sheik, and then we'll be back with the weird news.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Hold that thought. It's crapper time.
Our friends over at Paramount sent a new Blu-ray to review, and it's a little different from what we usually talk about in that it's a silent film from 1921. A Blu-ray celebrating its 100th film anniversary, which is pretty crazy to think about. Like, when we think about movies, we don't think about it being a 100-year-old industry, let alone, closer to 125 years now. Of course, a lot of the films prior to 1920 are lost to time due to how they were filmed. The actual film itself was on a different type of chemical process that led to easily setting on fire. And there's been many instances where entire film libraries were lost. Well, this film, The Sheik, is one of the few from that era that was preserved, and preserved quite well, actually. This is a Rudolph Valentino starring film. Those that do know who he is, from our demographic, know him as listed as the Latin Lover, which is funny, being that he's Italian, and not Latino. So, but it's the time. Back then, a lot of times people changed their names to something more Americanized or Westernized, so that they could, avoid being put into a category of, hey, this is an ethnic group, yada yada yada. But he, in a time before voicing and actual audio was necessary, it was all about the pantomime and how realistic your stage presence could be. He pulled it off as sort of the hunky heartthrob of the era, probably more so than pretty much anybody else in the silent film era. Now, this movie obviously isn't completely silent, because they would have had a soundtrack play with it. You'd have at a bigger theater in a bigger town like Toronto or New York or someplace, you'd have an actual orchestra playing the music for the film, or you'd have a phonograph, or some format of that, or at the very least you might have like one person, maybe not an orchestra, but you'd have one or two people sitting there playing the violin and somebody maybe playing the piano. In pretty much every theater that you went to, that was sort of the deal. That's what you did in the silent film era. So what we have here is the original score in stereo, lossless audio. Somebody has gone and they recorded a full musical piece orchestra for it, which is great. So you get sort of the premium experience of what you would have had at a larger theater. They've also gone and done something that I like that started to happen about 10 years ago, where they would go back and take these black and white silent films and tint them for certain scenes, because when they were first shown in theaters, they would actually have like pieces of colored glass that they would put in front of the projection from the projector itself over certain scenes. And what that would do is it would tint it to yellow or orange or blue or red, and it would, whatever the emotion that the scene was supposed to evoke, you would have it tinted to that. So before the ages of a lot of special effects, you'd have, let's say, a horror film would be something murderous was happening, it would be tinted red, or something romantic would happen, it would be tinted another color, that sort of thing. So this has that tinting done to it during the restoration, and it looks pretty darn good considering its age. There doesn't appear to be too much damage or anything to the film print. It's been restored quite well without using really any digital noise reduction in here. So the film itself is, I don't want to go too much into the plot because it actually holds up pretty well, but it was one of the last major pictures that Rudolph Valentino did before his untimely death. It was only like 3 years before he died. 4 years before. Oh, no, wait. He died in 1925 or 26. My film historian brain is crapping out on me. It's about 4 or 5 years before he passed away. And it was considered sort of a romantic epic for its era. He plays the titular character, the Sheik. And I was worried that a drama romance kind of picture from this time period would be really boring or not hold up or anything, and it holds up quite well, actually. It's a fascinating piece of cinema for, only a few years later we were in the talkie films, and it feels like almost when he died it was a transitionary period, because after he died, like 2 to 3 years later, everything was converting to talking pictures completely. So this is sort of peak early, like not golden age of Hollywood. Like, this is peak early, the beginnings of Hollywood's fame, and it was one of the biggest pictures released at the time. So it's neat that Paramount has the ability to remaster and release this, and I kind of hope that in the future, if the the Blu-ray sells well, that we might actually get a 4K release, because you can maybe see even more details in it. But as it stands, it's a pretty sweet release.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
Time for the weird news, and we have got 3 doozies for you here. The first one here is brought from Huffington Post, and it says, court rules Pablo Escobar's cocaine hippos are legally people. So it says here, more than 80 hippos previously owned by Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar have a unique distinction in U.S. law. They are the first non-human creatures to be legally considered people. The U.S. District Court of Southern District of Ohio recognized the late Escobar's infamous cocaine hippos as legal persons for the first time in the United States. The ruling on October 15th came on the same day the Animal Legal Defense Fund filed an application on behalf of hippo plaintiffs in Colombia intended to stop that country's government from killing the animals. The ALDF announced the decision in the news release Wednesday. The hippos are descendants of 4 illegally imported by Escobar. They were set free after his death in 1993. Since then, the hippos have increased the numbers to more than 80, and they are reportedly wreaking havoc on the local ecosystem. However, some scientists have argued they may be actually restoring ecological functions lost for thousands of years due to human-driven extinctions. In July, Colombian attorney Luis Domingo Gomez Maldonado filed a lawsuit on behalf of the animals to save them from being killed, saying that sterilization was a better option. Although Colombian law gives non-human creatures legal standing to bring lawsuits to protect their interests, the country's legal system can't compel someone in the U.S. to produce documents supporting the case. However, a U.S. law allows interested persons in Colombia to go to a U.S. federal court to seek the ability to obtain documents and testimony. So the ALDF applied for the hippos' rights to compel 2 Ohio wildlife experts who study non-surgical sterilization to provide testimony on behalf of the plaintiffs. By granting the application, the district court recognized animals as legal persons for the first time in U.S. history. The ALDF news release Wednesday said the testimony of wildlife experts Elizabeth Berkeley and Richard Berlinski would be used to support the use of contraceptive called PZP. Yada yada. It goes into detail a little bit what that does. And essentially, by accident, they made them people. So that is quite interesting, I think, overall, as far as what legal ramifications this is actually going to provide and be. It's kind of hard to tell what it's kind of inconsequential. I don't think doesn't mean they can vote or anything. It's just sort of a funny little thing that maybe can be exploited for certain uses later on. The next story here comes from the Salt Lake Tribune. Delivery driver shot in leg in Midvale, then drives back to Amazon fulfillment center. Police in Midvale are investigating how a package delivery driver received a gunshot wound to the leg on Saturday night. Salt Lake City Police received a call from Amazon Fulfillment Center Sunday morning about a man who wrapped a gunshot wound. Upon arrival, police learned the man was a delivery driver who had reported hearing a commotion around the area of 7900 South and Main Street in Midvale on Saturday night. When he felt a burning sensation in his leg, the man then was found at work in the Amazon Fulfillment Center, police said, where he was still severely bleeding from when the call to the police occurred. The delivery driver was taken to the hospital where doctors confirmed the wound was due to a gunshot and the bullet had traveled completely through his leg. This was just a short story that I thought was strange. I guess if it didn't make a sound, or he didn't even really feel it. It must have been going at such a high velocity, and it didn't go through any major tissue. I guess just the muscle, maybe, because it didn't get dislodged in him. It just went straight through. I wonder. They probably don't even know what kind of bullet it was. So I mean, I think I would know if I was shot, but maybe not. I guess it's maybe a better thing to think of. I'd rather have that than have it be where I'm in horrible pain where I know I've been shot. I guess good for him, but also, what does that say about the mentality of somebody who works at Amazon, that they were more concerned with, didn't care about whatever pain they had. They were more concerned about getting back to their place before they were docked for time. So our next story here comes from WDRB.com, and it is Delta Airlines to sell Kentucky Priest pasta sauce. Father Jim Shitchko is a Catholic priest from Lexington, Kentucky, known for going above and beyond others. He's paid people's hospital bills, funeral bills in the past. Then he started selling spaghetti sauce, a recipe his mom passed down to him, sending all the proceeds to 3 organizations that help others. Those proceeds just got a big boost. Delta Airlines is now on board with his sauce. The airline Sky Clubs in Cincinnati, Detroit, Boston, Atlanta will serve the sauce. Once again teaches each and every one of us that if you have a dream, a will, and a desire, and if you're willing to do good to others, it always comes back to you 1,000-fold, he said. It's always been my belief, and it's always true. Miss Marie's spaghetti sauce is bottled in Louisville. Just a short little story, a little weirdness. So the airlines is now selling Kentucky Priest pasta sauce, so is it holy sauce? And the final story here for the weird news is brought to us from Business Insider, and it is a man was covered in poop after a passing plane dumped toilet waste over his backyard. A man was sitting in his backyard in Windsor, England, when raw sewage suddenly fell from the sky. According to a local counselor, his whole garden umbrellas, and him were covered in poop. The counselor said that frozen sewage falling from the sky isn't unheard of, but its unfortunate ordeal is much rarer. A man was enjoying the sun in his backyard in Windsor, southeast England, when a passing plane dropped toilet waste on him and his garden furniture. A local council said during a recent meeting, the unfortunate incident in which the plane discharged sewage took place in July. His whole garden was splattered in a very unpleasant way, said Karen Davies, ward councillor for Clewar East, during the October 14th meeting. He was out in his garden at the time, and it was really horrible experience. We saw that. Davies said that there were several incidents in the year which frozen sewage is dropped along flight routes. Windsor is on the flight path from London's Heathrow Airport, which is about 8 miles away from the historic town. It says here, raw sewage landing in someone's background is much, much more rare than just having it drop frozen poo from the sky. Another counselor suggested that the summer's warmer weather might have contributed to it. Whitfield Parish Councillor Jeff Paxton, who has worked in the airlines for 4 decades, said what happened was so rare and one he had not seen in a long time, meaning it's happened before. He added that modern toilets on planes are vacuum secured and are normally reliable as they rely on pressure suction to work. So the unfortunate situation must have resulted from aircraft failure or a failure of adequately service it. According to the Maidenhead Advertiser, the Windsor resident was unable to claim any insurance from the ordeal as the cost of the damage was relatively low. But just picturing him looking up at the sky, oh my, what is that? And just being covered in shit, rain shit from the sky. And that is going to do it for the weird news this week. A little bit shorter, not much to bounce off of because, Birdman wasn't here, but I have sent him the actual articles, so I'm sure he had a bit of a chuckle when he had some extra time to read them. And we are going to take a break now and go to Birdman's review of the new NHL game, and then I'll come back at the end to sort of say what's happening this week on the show.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
Hello out there, we're on the air, it's hockey night tonight. Tension grows, the whistle blows, and the puck goes down the ice. The goalie jumps and the players bump and the fans all go insane. Someone roars, Bobby scores at the good old hockey game.
Hey guys, this is Mike the Birdman here, and I'm here to talk to you about something unexpected that showed up in my inbox last week. A review code was provided to us for NHL 22, developed by EA Vancouver, published by EA Sports. I reviewed this on the PlayStation 5. I've actually been playing the NHL games all the way back as early as NHL 93. My favorite one was NHL 95 because of the really cool creative player. Plus, that's, I think, when they introduced one-timers for the first time. And it was just a lot of fun. Plus, I was really into hockey in the 1990s. I fell out of the series till about 2005 when I was actually gifted a copy by the Owen Sound Attack of the OHL League when I was doing music for some of their games at the Bayshore Arena in Owen Sound, Ontario. So I've had a very long hockey career in some ways. I've always been involved in the sports. I used to do stuff for the Ontario Minor Hockey Association. So this was kind of a nice way to get back into hockey. So let's talk about the game itself. Now, I played this way differently than most other reviewers did. I played mostly offline and focused on the created character mode, which is called Be a Pro. And I wanted to create myself. And then, you know, because I'm differently abled now, it was kind of nice to relive the fantasy of being a hockey player. So I chose myself as a goaltender. I was playing for the Owen Sound Attack, and I got drafted 150th overall, so obviously I suck, and I got picked up by the Philadelphia Flyers, which is kind of cool, because I listen to WMMR out of Philadelphia, and I hear their radio broadcasts of those games all the time when I listen to the station. So playing this through the created mode was a lot of fun. You simulate parts of it, but there's also like a role-playing game aspect to it too, where you can play each game you want, you can adjust the rules, custom length, all that sort of thing, but you can also boost stats like a role-playing game. And what I mean by that is you can manage your career. Like, do you want to be a team player? Are you more of like a social media superstar? So I was kind of the social media superstar douchebag who really didn't do a whole lot on the rink, but they kept me around. They signed me to my entry-level contract for a couple of years. I don't think I was making very much because I spent my money on barbecue, hairstylists, and I think a motorcycle is what I spent my money on. But you would gain experience, stuff that by actually playing the games and not just simming, and you could earn points that rank up things, and you could buy stuff in a skill tree, which basically helps you control, like, say, puck control, how much endurance you have, are you a good stick handler, how well do you control the rebound, all sorts of things like that. And then as you level up through the game, you could earn something called X Factors, which kind of are like power-ups for your player. I had one called Dialed In, where I get really good after you have about 15 shots on me. And because I'm a goaltender, it's kind of reliant upon you to be super quick to think. But because I'm kind of relying on that old hockey experience, I know how to cut off the angles, follow them. And because of the way that the control setup is for this, you control your goaltender mostly with the right stick, but you can also very quickly go across the crease by hitting the right stick, and just, it's so fluid, it's so cool. You can even do dive saves, you can poke check, stuff like that. It's really interactive and fun. I didn't so much play a lot of playing like a forward or a defenseman. That's just never been my bag in hockey. It's just not how I approach the sport. Because I was way too fat for it back then, and I don't know, just I felt more rewarding being the anchor of a team. And as I started playing through about my second or third season in this, I started getting better. I really started getting the kind of hang of this, and my favorite opponent was always the Toronto Maple Leafs. I would have loved to have been traded to them, or maybe hoping they'd pick me up, but I gotta stick with my Flyers. And let's talk about the Flyers for a second in this game. When you're in the Wells Fargo Center, which is where the Flyers kind of play out of, you could see Gritty. Gritty is the orange monstrosity, this abomination of a mascot, and I love him. He's so stupid. I love it. The fact that he's here is amazing. Like, there are so many little things to love here. I even went into a little bit, I dipped my toe into the Ultimate Team mode, which is basically Microtransaction City, but because I got like the super edition of this, I got a bunch of points and packs to unlock my ultimate team, and I actually got some really good people from the Toronto Maple Leafs, which was really cool. The one character I really wanted, there are two that I wanted, because that's my childhood. I would have loved to have gotten Wendell Clark, number 17. I had his jersey when he was the captain. I even had his jersey when he was briefly with the Quebec Nordiques before he finally retired. I also would have loved to have gotten number 93, Dougie Gilmore. If you're a good old Ontario boy like I am, you know how much he does for his community. Same with like Wendell Clark. It's really cool. Plus, I decided to just browse some of the other teams. So I saw people like Lanny McDonald, Rocket Richard. It's such a trip through hockey. And then even looking at some of the local rosters, it was cool to see the Owen Sound Attack. You can even get Owen Sound Attack masks, like, because I'm a goaltender, I had the Attack mask. That is awesome, considering how many times I've actually been at the Bay Shore and been up close to that bits of equipment. It really brought this game alive for me. Now, I did play this game with most of the accessibility settings on, and I really like that. I played this with the NHL 94 controls, and I had a blast with this because it wasn't so simple. Yeah, you can turn on the sim thing, you can really control your like kind of stick handling, but for some reason I can't wrap my mind around that. So if you want to play more arcadey hockey, you can. And honestly, I could talk about this game for like 15-20 minutes, but you know what, there's a show to do, we got things to cover, but there's a lot to digest here. If you like the simulation part of the NHL series here, there's a lot of cool stuff. And from what I understand, this is the first time the game's ever been in Frostbite, which is, I think, what they used for Mass Effect Andromeda. So it was kind of cool to see some of the details when you get up on the jerseys. And because I was the goaltender, you'd get really up close with me, and you could see how the jerseys could breathe because it's made of a very specific type of material. So when you're out on the ice, you're not just cooking in this sweater. You can see where it's meant to breathe. That's another thing too. You get alternate jerseys. I had the alternate one for Cancer. And this kind of made me really like the game. And I don't know whether this was creators speaking to me or what, but one of the packs that I opened after I actually earned one through like in-game currency, I opened it up and I got the Guelph Storm, which is where I currently live. That's my home OHL team currently. I got their home jersey. So that's really kind of incredible. So NHL 2K from EA Sports. I had a lot of fun with this. I can see how people could get sucked into the multi-player online, which I'm not good enough to dip my toe into that. But I might caution people against the microtransactions because you are getting random. You could get players that are very, very low on the thing, but you could also end up with like, hey, here's Sidney Crosby, who's like an 80-something, or hey, here's Austin Matthews, or Jaromir Jagr, or Mario Lemieux, or something like that, right? Or, you know, even an old-timey hockey player like Frank Mahovlich, I think is in this, or Tim Horton. So yeah, there's a lot of fun here. But if you don't want to spend money, you don't have to. There is a drip of in-game currency. I wouldn't be patient enough for that. But the offline modes are ridiculously fun. There's even a game where you can play outside. It's like kind of pickup hockey. But the creative player, it's a lot of fun. And just being able to role-play scenarios. And they're really simplistic, but the presentation also helps too, because it does sound like a call-in radio show, and the one I'm most familiar with is on the Fan 590 in Toronto. This sounds like real hockey being called. It sounds like real sports talk radio being produced. And the final point I want to make before I give my final recommendation to this game, it uses the PlayStation 5's controller speaker to play music, and you can hear the on-ice trainer saying, "Hold it! Change lines!" That's awesome. I appreciate details like that. I wish more developers would do more with the internal speaker and adaptive triggers. I'm glad it's done here. It's fantastic. So I'm going to go against the grain with what a lot of other reviewers are saying, and I'm going to say pick this up. It's a lot of fun. You can keep your rosters updated in terms of accessibility. You can fine tune this to your experience. So, as Red Green might say, keep your stick on the ice and check out NHL 22.
We're still in the early stages of this period. The game is still scoreless. Stevenson's won the draw here in the offensive zone. Oh, scores! Right on the doorstep. He pounces off a rebound and puts it home. Even Brannigan's got a good look at this one. Right through the 5-hole. He doesn't close it down.
Those magnificent bastards. Color me kooky, but something very odd is going on around here.
You're not allowed to talk anymore.
And that is going to do it for the show this week. What do we have coming up programming-wise for you? Well, as I said earlier, we've got pretty much a show a day. We've got... let's see here. Today is Monday, so you've got obviously this show. But Tuesday we have a new Earth versus Soup, as well as Thursday. Wednesday we should, depending on recording schedules, we should have a new. It should be our final. It's either Wednesday or Friday. You're going to be getting our final Cronenberg episode of Loose Cannon to finish up our Halloween Cronenberg month. And alternating whatever other day that is, we're probably going to have a Turd or Treasure review show with a couple movies from me and then a bunch of stuff from Birdman. He's got like 7 or 8 reviews ready to go, and we'll have to decide what we put where. I know he's got some toy reviews, and he's also got some other, I think it's like Nerf stuff and other books and stuff to talk about. And then rounding out the week, we've also got on October 29th is the classic Halloween episode that we did with James Rolfe for the Evil Dead franchise. And then on the 30th, we have our long-awaited recording that we did with James Rolfe for this year's Halloween special, which is on discussion on the George A. Romero Dead movie franchise. We talked about that back in the summer when James had some time, and with the intention of releasing it, right on Halloween. So we've got that. So we had some episodes, the last few weeks leading up to this. We're going to have a new one here. It was a pretty fun discussion we had with him. It was right before I took my break from the show for a bit, and when Birdman was coming back after months of him not being on the show, where I basically ran the show from like February until June. So you can probably, if you listen carefully, you can hear me being tired and ready to go to, I'd like to go to bed for 2 weeks now, please. And Birdman had just sort of come back, and he was enthusiastic. So, but it was a good recording we did with James. It's always nice to talk to him. I think I've done 2 or 3 with him now. As well as on Sunday itself, we're going to be having our, like on Halloween, we'll have our commentary coming out. We recorded an audio commentary for the 4K release of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. And then we should be back Monday with our post-Halloween regular show with a couple of reviews ready to go in there, and news and weird news. If things get so busy that it doesn't work out for a regular show, we might slot in the Turd or Treasure there instead. It'd basically be just the same reviews we were going to have, but with a few more if we don't have time to record the news, or if there isn't a whole lot of news this week to begin with. And then we'll be back on our regular schedule pretty much, because that's the first, pretty much for the next 4 weeks. And then after that, we'll be putting together our gift guide, and we'll have gift guide, 1 more week of regular programming, as well as the prototype for the Game Awards and our end of year game stuff. And then we're going to be having time off from the regular show until sometime usually middle of January. I think if we're stopping, it's usually about 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks we're off from the regular. But we still will have regular programming, it'll be things like pre-recorded episodes of Loose Cannon. We'll be having Nerd to the Third Power episodes here and there. We'll have Earth versus Soup pretty much right through to January, 2 a week. And we're also going to have our Stargate recordings for our actual play. I know Birdman has said 3 hours. It's probably going to be 2-hour sessions. Some 3 hours. It'll be depending on mostly how we all feel. But at the same time, I don't know how he's going to break them up, if they're going to be 1 hour releases or going to be 2 hour releases. If I'm willing to bet if it's 3 hours, it'll be broken up into a couple episodes each recording. If it's a 2 hour session each time, it might just be 2 hour episode that we release each time, or slightly less than 2 hours, whatever the flow is. It's just a matter of getting everybody together, and we have basic times for that. But the problem is, Birdman's recording times with all his other commitments have been difficult, but we're going to have a few recorded in the can before the actual break takes place. And then during those 4 or 5 weeks, we'll probably, since we're not recording much of anything else, maybe we might have a turn of treasure here and there, maybe 1 or 2 during that time period. The vast majority of the time off, if we do anything, will probably be 3 or 4 recording sessions that will record a few hours a piece. And that will be, that'll be enough for that story arc that we're going to do for season 2. And then we'll take a break and come back with other maybe one shots of different games, and we'll see how it goes, how we all feel come 2022. Who knows what the future is going to bring. I just know that Birdman wants to do more of those. So that's sort of, that's the long-term plan. But as far as this week goes, you're cram-packed with, an episode a day, at least, maybe 2 episodes a day in some cases of different things. And we will be back full force in November.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.